Hi there, Alan Tusk for the Historical Aviation Film Unit here. About 6 months after I was born, which is way too many years ago now, my wife was born in Rhodesia, the country now known as Zimbabwe. At the time, Rhodesia was not recognised as a sovereign state by much of the rest of the world. Previously known as Southern Rhodesia, a British Crown colony that had governed itself since 1923, in 1965 it had unilaterally declared its independence from Britain and regarded itself as a fully independent sovereign state. 15 years of turmoil followed, and the country became known as Zimbabwe in 1980, following the end of white minority rule. This landlocked southern African country has a colonial history spanning back to 1890, when Cecil Rhodes's British South Africa Company arrived in the area and proceeded to establish Fort Salisbury, now the capital city of Harare. Politics aside, and irrespective of the rights or wrongs of colonisation, the fact remains that the period between 1890 and 1980 saw a great deal of change in southern Africa, and the British Empire's development of the country now known as Zimbabwe was substantial, to the point that the country was often well represented in world affairs despite its relatively small size. And as such, there's a significant history from that time. The danger of post-colonial periods in any country around the world is that the earlier history can get lost and or forgotten about, whether it be deliberate or unintentional. Artefacts can be lost, people and stories forgotten, and a rich cultural history relegated to being seen as irrelevant. And yet, we're constantly reminded that those who don't learn from history are doomed to repeat it. It's always gratifying to find a group of people trying to preserve and document their history, just as we do here at the Historical Aviation Film Unit. In this case, it's the Rhodesian Services Association and their Lion Tusk Museum based in the city of Tauranga in New Zealand. I recently had the opportunity to visit the museum and talk to a couple of the founders and staff, and to find out what it's about and why it's an important facility and association for not only Rhodesians and Zimbabweans, but also Kiwis. Right, so Hugh, we're here in the Lion Tusk Museum in Tauranga. For Kiwis, what sort of links were there back in the day between New Zealand and Rhodesia? Why should Kiwis really make an effort to come and can see what you've got here as well?
Kiwis move around the world, everybody knows that, just like the Irish. So there were Kiwis during the pioneer time in Rhodesia. The first major conflict that Rhodesia was involved in was the Boer War. New Zealanders were involved in that. Two of the New Zealand contingents were actually based up in my hometown, which was then called Marandellas, of which Kiwis, along with other imperial troops, formed the Rhodesian Field Force, which was set up to go and relieve Mafeking. There were 5,000 imperial troops based there. There were a few Rhodesians in that force, I believe, but essentially they were an imperial force. They based in Rhodesia. They moved down to South Africa. From there, Rhodesians had connections came into contact with New Zealanders during other conflicts. Rhodesians were on the Western Front with Kiwis during World War II. Most notably, Rhodesians and Kiwis formed the basis of the LRDG, a Long Range Desert Group. Malaya, the Rhodesians were asked to put together what became Sea Squadron SAS. They were relieved by the New Zealanders. A number of New Zealanders came out to Rhodesia during World War II, one of who included my uncle, who was part of the Empire Air Training Scheme, which was training pilots, navigators and gunners. Then in the 60s and 70s, post-World War II, a number of Kiwis went out there. One who was a personal friend who died recently went out there to farm, met my parents, and when the call went out for volunteers from Malaya, he was one of the 1,000 that volunteered, of which 100 got chosen to go to Malaya.
Right, so there's been a long association between the two countries.
And that association has continued militarily in Iraq and Afghanistan, where Kiwis and former Rhodesian soldiers have served as contractors.
So yeah, my interest started probably when I joined the New Zealand Army.
Right.
I joined the New Zealand Army in 1980. At the same time, our 74 troops that were serving over there as peacekeepers returned to New Zealand.
Right, yeah. So it was around the transition time, was it?
Yeah. The senior NCOs that were training and influencing me were all veterans from the Rhodesian thing. There's a mannequin next to me here. It depicts the dress and everything that the monitoring force went into. Yeah, so then, and after that I vowed to actually go and see Zimbabwe, and that stayed there for quite a while.
Okay. So this was as a civilian?
Yeah. The influence of the people there and the help they gave me, poor destitute New Zealand ex-soldier travelling around Africa was amazing. So I always thought I would give something back to them if I got a chance. So here I am.
Okay. So whereabouts were you in Zim while you were there?
I live with a family in Rusapi, Harare, were the main haunts of me and a few of my mates. So, yeah.
And I think one interesting snippet of history that a lot of Kiwis won't know is that there was actually a Kiwi Prime Minister of Rhodesia.
Yes, there was. Sir Garfield Todd was Prime Minister of Rhodesia. I don't recall what period it was. I was too young. In point of fact, I never voted in Rhodesia except for when the Muzirewa government, that was Zimbabwe, Rhodesia. That was the first time that I got to vote.
So you're Zimbabwean?
Yes.
Born after the transition from Rhodesia to Zimbabwe?
86, yeah.
86. So you obviously don't have any direct experience with Rhodesia itself.
No.
What's it like volunteering in a place like this with that history of what your country used to be?
When I walked into the place, the first thing that struck my mind was like, I could relate to most of the stuff, you know?
Right. Yeah.
Like, you look at the uniforms, like I used to see this stuff, fine, I might have been a young boy, but like some of the uniforms that are still here are still worn by the, you name it, army, the police force, you name it, like, yeah.
Right.
And when I was young, my dad used to take me to these places, like, yeah, he had friends at the army barracks, so yeah, as kids, you know.
You get to assimilate that stuff that's around you, don't you? Yeah.
So the first thing that struck me was like, oh, I've seen that. I've seen that. You know, just like that, bang.
Right.
Just like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then this was like, yeah,
Right.
it's history.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've been motivational in things since round about 1999 to 2000, when we linked up with people in Auckland who'd been attending Anzac parades at Hobsonville. From there, this association had its roots when it was formally formed in about 2003. From there, we were invited by the 6th Battalion Hauraki Regiment to put a display in their garrison club. We had a number of reunions that we held there.
We originally had a get together and a talk, and PTSD wasn't a big thing then, but it certainly was a consideration. A lot of Rhodesian soldiers, ex-soldiers, hadn't adopted to the way that they were made civilians in the early 80s. So I saw a lot of troubled men and families of that era. So we had in the 90s we decided to have like fellowship meetings and get them together for Anzac Day and celebrate their service. And so we kind of kicked off from there. Started raising funds for 20 odd years, and then had a small pile of money, and with the future not being great, I suppose we decided to, if we have a museum or a place for them to come to, even if it's only for a year, you know, we've spent the money that we raised appropriately. We've been here 5 years now. Before that, we were bludging off other organisations, which really supported us, and we still support them.
In 2006, when Classic Flyers Museum was being built, we were invited to put displays in Classic Flyers. Most of these cabinets behind me were cabinets that we built and put into Classic Flyers. When Classic Flyers was given a mothballed Skyhawk from the Royal New Zealand Air Force, their contract was to keep it undercover. They had to take up the space with that plane that we were occupying. We moved into a secondary hangar. From there, we began to lose traction because the volunteers weren't taking visitors to the secondary hangar. The secondary hangar was also home for aircraft mechanics and so on. We lost our identity. We started to think about how we could become our own landlords or whatever. The concept of the money, the amount of money that we were going to have to raise was too big a hurdle for us to be able to get across.
When we had to move from Classic Flyers because of the room they wanted, that we held, they wanted for restoring aircraft. And they gave us a vehicle to move. They gave us the cabinets. They gave us all the support we had. So Classic Flyers, probably one of our closest and best supporters.
Great, great.
So in 2018, March 2018, we rented this industrial building here. The first job, other than cleaning the place up and so on, we used it as a giant spray booth to paint the Alouette III that is behind you there, and then we populated it with the cabinets and so on, which Classic Flyers kindly gave us. We'd built the cabinets, but they'd paid for the glass, which is the big part. Through a bit of trading and their generosity, we've ended up with all the cabinets. Plus, we've built more and so on since then. Since our official opening was about in November 2018, when we had an official opening, and we had the rolls of honour that are upstairs there that have been retrieved out of Africa, were blessed and so on as well, which was an important aspect to everything we're doing. So since then, this has been our home, and we've increased the number of displays and artifacts in here has increased exponentially. We also have an online database where we retrieve and assemble records. The museum itself is essentially a military themed museum, but as we're going along, more and more civilian type stuff is coming in.
So, I mean, looking around, there's a huge amount of stuff in here, and people can obviously come and spend quite a bit of time looking back through the history. Presumably quite a bit of this is donated, but I mean...
all of it's donated.
Right.
Whether it be from the actual servicemen or their families. Collectors, there are a few collectors in New Zealand that have donated stuff to us. But mainly from ex-Rhodesians.
Yeah.
Zimbabwean people, they've donated a lot. Yes.
You know, of everything in here, all the items that have been donated and things, I mean, what speaks to you the most? Is there anything in particular?
My favourite thing is the Lion Tusk Museum.
Good answer. Good answer.
No, and out of that, I'd say the field cap that General Wars donated, and the Navy uniform that was one of the 373 Rhodesians that served in the Royal Navy.
When you first started displaying, presumably down at Classic Flyers, I mean, the basis of that collection that was there, over what sort of time frame had that been built up, and was that primarily yours and Hugh's, or was that a lot of their early donations as well?
Right. Most of it was donated. There's a few things that we had bought as an association.
Right.
We had bought them to display important things.
Yeah.
There's visitors and guests always bring stuff in. Right. It's forever coming in.
Yeah, right. And as Hugh mentioned, I mean, this is now basically the only significant Rhodesian military history museum worldwide. Is that correct?
Yep.
Yep. So obviously any donations would be welcomed.
Yeah, well appreciated. Especially our main focus is the Anglo-Boer War, World War I and World War II.
Right.
And then there comes Malaya, Korea, and then the Bush War stuff. One of the other goals we have was to bring recognition for the service they did during World War II, where they lost more people per head of population than any other country in the world. World War I, they volunteered, just about every man volunteered to serve in the First World War. So much so that when World War II came, Parliament brought out a proclamation, I suppose, that no more than 60 Rhodesians will serve in the same unit because of the attrition they had in World War I. So, and that's why their battle honours for World War II was just called World War II, because they served in every service in every country, all over the world, with every service, Navy, Air Force, Army, Merchant Navy, nurses, and et cetera, et cetera.
So you come into the Lion and Tusk and you sort of feel at home again. Do you?
It's quite amazing. Like I say, when it comes to history knows no bounds, you know. Like getting here, just relating to everything, and I always meet some of the guys here and there, and one thing that I always have is I have respect for the old timers. I always reiterate that. And I always love the stories that they share. It's quite interesting because some of the things I wouldn't even have thought about it, like, oh, okay, that's interesting. You are telling me that this actually, like, you know, this place, and they'll actually explain like in detail, like, oh yeah, there's this place, if you go to that place, and it's quite interesting.
With a major change in the country, Rhodesia to Zimbabwe and so on, I mean, to me, it's always struck me that there's a really big risk of some of that earlier history being lost. And I mean, with you coming here, and as you say, hearing those old timers, seeing a lot of the collectible items and stuff here in the museum, how did you find it in terms of growing up in Zimbabwe? Was there stuff here that you had no idea about at all from the history perspective, or?
I might have been young, but between, like, I was born in '86, so when you look at it, basically, even if like pre-80s, it's like probably into the 90s, most of the stuff was still there.
Right.
Most of the stuff, like even if, let's say like this is more of like relating to like army stuff. If you were to go to like the army, like there's museums there, you can actually see some of the stuff here as well.
Right.
So there's so much, I wouldn't say I can relate to most of the stuff.
Right.
Surprisingly enough, there's so much that I'll be like, okay, I know that one, I know that one, I know that one. Yeah, even you look at that jersey.
The rugby jersey?
The rugby jersey, Yep. If you were to go today to whichever school, let's say it's a school, chances are the rugby jerseys that were worn in the 70s, 60s, they are still the same ones. Even like the blazers that we had at our boys' school are still the same that were worn back in the day. So it's kind of like it just carried on. Yeah, it just carries on, and most of the stuff has been more or less maintained. Yeah.
Let me just go back to something you said initially. Now, I mean, you walk in from the street here and it's the Lion and Tusk Museum, but you mentioned the association.
Yeah.
So explain to me the association and what's behind this actual physical collection.
The Rhodesian Services Association was formally formed in 2000 and 2003. We're a New Zealand registered charity. The emblem that we use is this image of a lion and tusk. This image was selected by the initial committee to represent our association. No wording on it. It is one of the oldest emblems of Rhodesia. It was part of Cecil Rhodes's personal coat of arms. It was used on sporting and all military badges. It's an association associated through the national sporting teams and all the forces. And so that's why we just had that emblem. It looks a little bit like the Sri Lankan cricket team's one, and one prominent politician in New Zealand actually mistook it at an airport for a Sri Lankan cricket supporter. So that's where that comes from. As I've said, the association is a registered charity, and so when we set up the museum, we decided to call it the Lion and Tusk Museum of the Rhodesian Services Association as its full title.
So, as an association, you're actively looking for members to join and support, presumably?
As a formal association, we have to have a way of identifying who can stand for office, etc. And so we define that by people who pay subscriptions or financial members. They can stand for office, etc. Initially, our financial membership was a very nominal amount. I think we started at $5. It crept up to 10. In late 2019, it occurred to my dyslexic brain that if at which stage our financial membership was $25 per person, that 25,000 times 1,000 equals $25,000, which at that stage was about what our rent and rates, our base costs of running this museum were. Those costs have increased. Currently, our costs are $30,000 a year. That's just the base costs. We have run in the last 3 terms of our financial year, we've run close to 1,000. I think last year we got up to 980 or something. Currently we're at 960. Yes, pushing financial membership is a strong point of ours. Our other income streams also include from our CQ store, where we sell replica goods, quality items of interest to people of Rhodesian and Zimbabwean background, as well as generous donations from around the world.
Once I came here, like the museum, surprisingly enough, felt like home. Yeah, because we've got so much to relate with some of the guys, and I've been fortunate that I've met some of the old timers as well, and they always share these stories of back in the day. It's quite interesting. Right. Yeah. And the other thing is, my high school, I did at Oriole Boys High School in Zimbabwe, Harare, and surprisingly enough, I've met some other old guys who actually attended the school back in the day, way back, because it's quite an old school. Right. Yeah.
I should imagine that more than anything, the economic situation in Zimbabwe now and how it's been for a while, there's probably not a huge number of young Zimbabweans like yourself travelling the world. I guess it's pretty difficult. Do you actually get any in through the place at all, or is it mainly the Rhodesians for one?
You get everyone. You get everyone. Besides, we always I've got this thing of word of mouth.
Yeah.
So all my mates who stay here, they already know this place, and some other mates, and always when I go out in different places, I always make sure I tell them, there is a place there.
Right. It's Lion Tusk, the Rhodesian Services Association, but it's not just Rhodesians, is it, that are interested or in fact should even come and visit the museum? It's not specifically just Rhodesians.
You're quite correct, and the answer to that is not at all. We've got a very diverse membership. We've got members on every continent. At one stage we had members on 7 continents, including Antarctica, because we had one of our members was on some job in Antarctica. So very diverse. We've got people from all over, those who have lived in Rhodesia, born Rhodesia, Zimbabwe, descendants of, but an increasing number of people who just support what we do. They like history. They want to support the museum to see that we're able to keep representing and storing the history of a country that doesn't exist anymore.
Since 1965, the British have refused to acknowledge Rhodesia's support. Right. So there's no monuments, there's nothing outside of Zimbabwe that puts their name up and says that they served.
Right.
If one day that things settled in Zimbabwe, well then we'd be more than happy to send this whole lot back there. But at the moment we are the biggest and now only Rhodesian museum outside of Africa. And so it is vitally important for us to preserve all these artifacts that are here and anything else that comes in, because otherwise the danger is they either get destroyed or they end up in the hands of private collectors, never to be seen by the public. I've got nothing against collectors, but you know, I fight for the stuff to be in public view.
And presumably from what I can see, I mean, your focus is very much on the history, and because of that it's apolitical. You're not, it's not political at all. It's just representing the history of the country.
Yeah, we're not political. We're not political here. Obviously, politics comes into everything. There wouldn't be wars if there wasn't for politicians, but we don't focus on any political aspects here at all. The sole purpose here is displaying artifacts, giving information on those artifacts, and what people want to make of that is their own private matter.
So we do Anzac Day here.
Yeah.
It's all nations and all races.
So yeah, you're loving it here in Tauranga in New Zealand. You have a great time here in the museum doing your voluntary work. I guess from what I'm hearing you say, the big thing to get across in the video is that all your old timers out there need to come in and share your stories with O'Brien and the crew, and be part of this journey in this museum. Yeah.
The good thing about it is, like, when I look at some of the stories that I've been told, they're here.
Yeah.
And I'll always remember that, okay. And when the time comes for me, I'll be also an old timer at a certain time and age. And it's always good to share some of that knowledge and information as well.
Great.
Yeah, because I believe in passing on the knowledge, just like what these guys are doing to us. It's a blessing, and I'll be honest with you, I'm so fortunate to have this opportunity. Yeah, and you look at all these guys, they are part of like my family. When I went to my trip a year ago, these guys, they knew people who I didn't even know existed, and the next minute my trip was easy as.
No, that's great.
Yeah.
Brilliant. Oh, well, it's a fantastic looking collection you've got here, and obviously you're working and you're connecting people around the world via the association, so that's brilliant. And yeah, absolutely recommend any Kiwis that are interested in military history. The Wairu Army Museum isn't the only place you should come. You should come to the Lion and Tusk and Tauranga as well. So thanks for your time, Hugh.
No worries. Thanks very much.
So there you have it, the Lion and Tusk Museum and the Rhodesian Services Association. If you've got any interest at all in Southern Africa and the work that the association is doing to preserve and document this fascinating period of Rhodesian history, then check out their website at thelionandtusk.org and consider subscribing to the association, and that will enable Hugh, Tony and the volunteer crew at the museum keep the facility open and keep the history alive.
If you'd like access to our ever-increasing playlist of exclusive members-only videos, hit the join button and become a member of our channel for only a couple of dollars a month. For just a couple of dollars more, you can also get access to our full streaming video channel at historicalmachines.tv, which features full-length documentary programs. We'd love it if you'd support our efforts to preserve this visual history of these wonderful machines.